The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
Wrestling is not something that's, at that level that we experience here in our state or really even regionally. And so to see some of the best in the country, to see some of the best guys in the business from a coaching standpoint, and just the enthusiasm of the crowd and the numbers that turn out for those championships over those few days in Cleveland, it certainly set the tone that this was going to be something exciting that we were about to jump into.
In the big money world of Division I college athletics, only 5 championships actually make the NCAA money. Of course, the biggest is the Final Four, the NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament. Now as 68 teams play their way to a championship, it's called March Madness. The venues are large and the volume of printed brackets and online office pools is astronomical. The other championships that make the NCAA money are the College World Series, which is men's baseball, held annually in Omaha, Nebraska, the Frozen Four, which is the name for the NCAA Division I men's ice hockey tournament, the NCAA Division I men's lacrosse championship, and to the surprise of many, the NCAA Division I wrestling championship. Now, before you say, what about football? Well, what about football? Did you know the NCAA does not actually award a trophy and present an actual championship for what's called the Football Bowl Subdivision? FBS 1A? Oh, sure, there's a trophy, but that's the college football playoff. The only NCAA logo on a Division I football trophy actually belongs to the winner of what's called the Football Championship Subdivision, formerly known as 1AA. Go figure. They have a playoff. They can figure it out. Semantics and official designations aside, wrestling has been a consistent moneymaker at the championships level for almost 2 decades. Much of that has come from the move away from campus sites and onto larger metropolitan areas and major league sports arenas, or in the case of 2020, NFL stadiums. Yes, Minneapolis' U.S. Bank Stadium, home of the Minnesota Vikings, is expected to draw over 40,000 fans across each of the 6 sessions in March of 2020 for the NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships. It's an indication that the health of wrestling is improving. It's also a great spot to sell the sport of wrestling to curious college administrators. For people looking to start a Division I wrestling program in Arkansas, a sellout crowd at Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland in March of 2018 was the perfect backdrop to make history. If you've never been to an NCAA Division I wrestling championship, the Saturday, the 3rd day of competition, that's where sessions 5 and 6 are. Everybody that's competing on Saturday is an All-American. They've earned their right to a top 8 placement at one of 10 weight classes. In between session 5 and 6, there's a couple hours. ESPN gets their production truck and team ready to go. The venue builds a stage. They bring in a couple thousand more seats. It is a real big show. 1 center mat, 20 athletes, 10 weight classes, do battle. It is 3 hours of absolute intensity. But before we get there, the setup. Something was happening in Cleveland in 2018. At a restaurant just outside of Quicken Loans Arena, a modest press conference was held, led by Mike Moyer, the executive director of the National Wrestling Coaches Association, and it included administrators from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, not just in athletics, but from the entire school. With the media present and the eyes of the wrestling world already on Cleveland, this was a prime opportunity to drop a bombshell on Division I sports, specifically Division I wrestling.
And so as we talk about a new program in wrestling, we've added some programs over the last 20 years that have really elevated the profile of our institution. We certainly think wrestling will help do that.
This is Chase Kahn, the athletic director at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, or simply Little Rock. He's an Arkansas native, and at 34, he's one of the youngest athletic directors in Division I. This is the first time I met Chase, as he joined the Short Time Wrestling podcast just a month after the announcement. Here he explains the dynamic of the University of Arkansas at Little Rock.
But we sit here in the heart of the capital city. We're a metropolitan campus. We've got just under 12,000 students. We've got about 1,400 students that live on campus. But we're really lucky to be right here in the heart of the state and in a capital city that has so much to offer. We've got a great fan base and base of supporters. We've got an unbelievable venue to play basketball in, which will also serve as the home for our competitions in wrestling. We built this facility about 12 years ago. I think it cost us about $25 million. That was supported by a private gift. So a lot of great support here in the community. And I think as we begin to talk about wrestling, that also, too, has been supported heavily by a local donor here that's made this a reality.
If you've listened to the previous 4 episodes, the next name spoken should come as no surprise.
Yeah, and I think it starts with Greg Hatcher, and you got to know Greg. Greg's an unbelievable person. He's a very successful businessman, has a top-notch insurance agency here in Little Rock, and has really become part of the fabric of this city and state. And when Greg puts his mind to something, he gets it done, and he's a sports enthusiast. He's a youth sports enthusiast. And so over the last 10 years, what he's done in the high school ranks, going from no programs to nearly 200 high school programs that compete across the state of Arkansas, it's really incredible. And where it's become even more real for our institution is that we've hosted the Arkansas State Championships in wrestling over the last 9-10 years here in our building. And so where our wrestling program will compete, we've been hosting the high school championships, for some time. And then each year it just continues to get bigger and bigger. And the crowds that we're drawing, the communities, it's every corner of the state that's represented. And I think this past year we had some 5,000 or 6,000 come through our building over 2.5 days to watch those championships. And so it's moments like that. It's watching the sport grow in our own state. It's watching the high schools benefit, from the energy, the involvement that these kids have. So it's made it very real for us. And Greg has had this dream of starting wrestling at the Division I level, and in particular in his backyard at Little Rock, for some time. And he and I have been talking about it, ever since I became the athletic director here at Little Rock. But as conversations have gotten more serious, as we really looked at how can we make this not just a program at this level, but make it a successful program, you get excited when you talk to a guy like Greg. And I think our institution's commitment to doing this has gotten Greg excited. And that's what's led to such a significant gift to make this a reality.
Early on in the series, I explained how Greg Hatcher made phone calls and made phone calls and made phone calls and got a hold of other people to make phone calls, pretty much refusing to take no for an answer when it came to starting high school wrestling in Arkansas. He first reached out to Arkansas Little Rock back in 2007 or 2008. This has been a long play. Here's Greg Hatcher.
Well, I was calling on all of the colleges, and I had talked to the president of ULR, and he was interested, but I don't know if I talked to him on the first one, but I certainly talked to him later. He was in Rotary with me. His name was Joel Anderson. And, it's a little harder to put in a Division I program because they just expect more. But eventually what got ULR's attention was Joel Anderson retired. I think he wanted to do it at the time, but the new president came in, and he was looking for ways to grow the student body, and we had a new athletic director at the same time, and so they were both wanting to try it. I had worked on them, but it always kind of gets pushed back a little bit. But Chase came to me and said, hey, the new president's kind of interested in doing it. We talked about it. I told him I would build him a facility, and I would, help him with mats and uniforms and coaches' salaries for a year and all kinds of things. And we took him to the NCAA tournament, and they said they'd do it. But right when it got time to do it, Chase will laugh about this, but he came to me and he said, we've lost our basketball coach. Can we put it off, another year? Can we do this? And I said, no, it's a take it or leave it off, or it's either do it right now or I'm not doing it.
This was not a scenario that Mr. Hatcher was willing to go down. He'd already gone down that Old Town Road once before.
I had offered probably 2 or 3 years ago to donate $1 million to the program. So they came 2 or 3 years later, and I had sold my agency to a private equity group, and I had so much money that I wanted to donate, and I had already donated to Ouachita Baptist University a new indoor soccer facility, to Harding University a new soccer facility. I'd built a lot of new structures out at Mighty Bluebirds for all the kids that I worked with that nonprofit, and I'd already spent my money. Now they're coming to me and they wanted the money. Remember, the greatest motivator is the fear of loss. And so I said, I basically told Little Rock, I'll do it on 3 conditions. Number 1, that we get 9.9 scholarships, so we wouldn't have a rinky-dink program that had 3 scholarships or no scholarships. Number 2, that we had to be part of the Big 12. Okay? And number 3, it had to be done now. Chase wanted to do it, and so did Andrew, but people get their plates full, but Chase got it done. He laughed, and I said, you can get it done. You'll hire that basketball coach, and we'll help you hire the wrestling coach.
Sometimes aren't you just waiting for Hatcher to do that whole, Wall Street boardroom CEO yelling, you'll do it now or you're fired? Yeah, none of that. I don't know what's more intimidating. But back to Little Rock. and Chase Kahn.
I think anytime you get a chance to start a new program, and it doesn't matter what it is, I think there's always a great deal of excitement and pride as a staff and as a university when you get to launch something like this. I think getting to see the national and regional reaction and also the local reaction, and even though we may not be in a tradition-rich wrestling region, we're not very far from the Oklahoma States of the world and the respect that we have for what's going on in the Big 12. So that certainly has been somewhat of a surprise, but also a lot of fun to enjoy and watch. And then also with Greg Hatcher, I think watching anytime you get a chance to work with someone that has a passion for an initiative, that's willing to be extremely philanthropic, and then helping him in a way realize a dream to start a Division I program. It's brought a great deal of joy, and I can't say enough about Greg Hatcher and his commitment, tenacious. And certainly persistent in wanting us to do this here at Little Rock. But he was also very patient with us. And so I'm so appreciative to Greg, and watching him be a part of this process and really be a huge part of this process has been certainly very fulfilling.
We don't want to put the cart before the horse because there are a lot of moving parts that got this thing rolling. One of the numerous concerns when it comes to big-time college athletics is money. Where's it going to come from? Earlier in the series, you heard from Mike Moyer, the executive director of the National Wrestling Coaches Association, an organization for wrestling advocacy and education that's helped add over 200 wrestling programs since the turn of the century. The struggle to add college wrestling programs is real for Mike and his group.
Well, this is what really puts things in perspective. So there's 120 Division 1A athletic departments in the country. So when I say 1A, that would be your 5 Power 5 conferences. So the Big 12, the Pac-12, the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC, right? So there's 5 of those conferences. And then there's the 5, the next, they call it the Group of 5, which would be like the MAC, Conference USA. So to put things in perspective, last year, only 22 of those 120 Division 1A athletic departments turned a profit, and the other 98 of them lost an average of $11.9 million. So as you can imagine, the appetite to just add more Olympic sports is just not all that great.
Many of the over 200 schools the NWCA has targeted over the past 20 years have been at enrollment-driven institutions, schools that thrive on new students coming in through the doors to keep the school open and provide educational and athletic opportunities. At the Division I level, there are fewer enrollment-driven institutions as there are, say, at the NAIA or the Division III level. Even as a Division I institution, Conk did note the importance of new athletes, and more specifically, new students on campus.
Well, you look at the 60. If you just look at the 60 student athletes, I think something that will be important to our university that we want to explore is a club sport in wrestling, and looking at expanding possibly our footprint on the club side. And so if we invest in those different areas, it grows from 60 to 100 to 125. And so when you do the numbers and you look at the revenues that the institution will gain from those additional students, and we spent a lot of time. I mean, we did our due diligence. We put together our pro formas to really look at how this thing will play out over the next 5 to 7 years, and with the support of the administration. And I can't say that enough. And I think any AD will tell you you're only as strong as your administration. But our Chancellor, Dr. Andrew Roderson, our CFO, Steve McCullough, these guys bought into the vision, and they could see. If you just looked at it as a black and white numbers on paper scenario, that this thing would end up paying for itself and be a great asset to campus. And then you throw on top the private support that Greg has given and a commitment to get help, to get other folks involved, not only in our community, but regionally and nationally. It just started making more and more sense as we dug into it.
One thing that Hatcher outlined was solving problems. You heard him talk about other facilities at smaller schools within the state. Moyer's kind of borrowed the idea, and it's starting to work.
It's really important that everyone understands that when you have an opportunity to add a Division I program, it's a really, really, really big deal. Like, it's not unusual when we approach an administration to start a Division I program. We might get a price tag of $20 million. $10 million to endow the men's program, $10 million to endow the women's program. And the truth of the matter is, I don't want to say that that's not feasible, because you never know what's possible. But for most purposes, that's a long shot. And but every once in a while, you come across a Division I program that would entertain it for different reasons. And interestingly enough, a lot of times it's our ability to help a college president paint this picture of how wrestling might be able to help a university solve other problems, whether it's just other problems within the athletic department or other problems just from a greater standpoint of the university. And what I mean by that is it might be that the number one priority of a university is to build a new sports performance center. So, athletic training facilities and weight room and those kinds of things. And so it might be in the wrestling community that we have access to builders and developers. And maybe there's a way that through our connections, we can either help them significantly reduce the cost of building that facility or possibly even get it built for free. And so if we can help a university solve some other problem that might be bigger, it's a lot easier for them to give us what we want, which is a wrestling program.
Now, coming back to where we began, the NCAA Championships, the proverbial icing on the cake, to announce this Little Rock edition.
Yeah, I'd say it blew me out of the water. My exposure to the sport at that level was non-existent, and so to get to see it at its highest level, it was almost euphoric. It was pretty special. I tell you, both Greg and Mike had prepared us well, though. I mean, they really, and over the last couple of years, had a dream of being able to announce it on the day of the national championships, and so we were able to move quickly enough this spring to be able to make that a reality. And certainly was prepared, but you can never be prepared for that experience when you get that many people in there and the energy in the building and the passion for the sport itself. It was evident that there's a huge following in the country, but it was also very evident that I feel that Little Rock can be successful. You see programs that maybe aren't your traditional football programs or basketball programs, but that are having success there, at the championships. That certainly was exciting for us.
Now let's tie all this together. On episode 3, I talked with Rex Horn at Ouachita Baptist, how Ouachita was the first college wrestling program in the state, how important it was for that program, not just to be successful on the mat, but be successful financially. How closely was Chase Conk looking at Ouachita, looking at Williams Baptist, looking at Lyon College, looking at Central Baptist, looking at all the new programs within the state? Were they serving as blueprints?
Yeah, all of them. And I think it's really impressive at all those various levels of what those programs have been able to do, and certainly Greg's had a big role in every one of them. What made us a little unique is the fact that we're a public institution, and so there was it's a little bit different, with the private model versus the public model, and so working with Greg, working with our administration, certainly you can't deny the fact that there's going to be an enrollment impact. When you're talking about a school of 12,000. What is 60 new student athletes? Well, those 60 new student athletes that we're going to pick up from the addition of wrestling and then also the investment in some of our other female sports, we've got a great cohort of student athletes. They're high achieving in the classroom. They had right now we're carrying a cumulative GPA of a 3.3, which is a department record. So it's not just new students; it's a great cohort of very good students. And so as we talked to our administration about the growth of this sport and the potential to bring it to Little Rock, we didn't have to sell it very hard. And of course, you can look down the road at some of these other programs that have been started at the college level to see that it works. And so we're excited to get this thing going here in 2019. The
buzz in Division I wrestling isn't just around Little Rock. In December of 2017, Presbyterian College in Clinton, South Carolina, one of the tiniest schools in Division I, announced it was adding both men's and women's wrestling, becoming the first Division I institution to add both sports at the same time. With 2 new departments in Division I adding the sport, were there any phone calls between Conk and then Presbyterian Athletic Director Danny Sterling?
Danny was very helpful. We had a conversation a few months back as we were getting more serious about this, and seeing how they're going to approach it. And it gave some comfort. You're having another Division I institution, start a program about the same time that we were looking at doing it. So he certainly was helpful. And, when you're at a smaller campus like that, the impact that their investment in athletics is going to make in their overall enrollment is going to be significant. And I think that's extremely smart as we all compete for students. But to use athletics for an enrollment management strategy, I think is very important. And as you look at cuts across the country, to different sport programs, there's a different way you can look at it. And I think that's how Presbyterian's looking at it. I think that's how we're looking at it here at Little Rock. Sometimes when you're faced with those challenges, it's hard to do. You have to find the resources, but it's also time to kind of put the foot on the pedal and accelerate, because you can recruit and attract students that otherwise maybe your institution would miss out on. And you can do that through athletics.
Some obvious questions popped up as Little Rock would be set to begin competition in November of 2019. What conference? How many coaches were you going to hire? Who was going to be the first hire? When is the timeline? When's there going to be a practice facility? Where are these guys going to compete? Who are they going to wrestle? Plenty of questions. Still plenty of time to get those answers.
We hope to have somebody on board by July 1. So we're going to move pretty quickly. We've obviously already had a lot of folks reach out to us, ahead of time, and we'll have a good year of recruiting. We'll be able to do some things, in that year from the 18-19 academic year to really gear up for the fall of 2019. We'll bring on one assistant coach at first. We don't have that timeline fine-tuned just yet, but once we get our head coach in place and we get our game plan together, we'll move forward with that. The conference affiliation piece, it's too premature to really speak in specifics, but we certainly feel good about our footprint. We think that we're investing in our program at the appropriate level, to be attractive, and it's our goal to have a home, sooner than later.
Little Rock hit its coaching deadline. Instead of waiting till July 1st, the Trojans introduced Neil Erisman, an Oklahoma State alum and North Carolina assistant, as its first head coach on June 20th, 2018. Conference affiliation took a little longer. One of Greg Hatcher's stipulations was that Little Rock join the Big 12 for wrestling. The Big 12 vetoed Little Rock's application to compete in the conference as an affiliate member for wrestling, perhaps because the Big 12 already had a number of non-Big 12 members as affiliates, or a less likely but funnier theory that athletic directors didn't want another Oklahoma State Cowboy on the bench in the conference. As far as that conference timeline, it was officially checked off on May 24th, 2019, when Arkansas Little Rock announced it was joining the Pac-12 Conference as an affiliate member in wrestling. But even before the hiring of a coach was made, Chase Conk knew the eyes of the country were on his school, and he's pretty fired up about that.
When you have a chance to make a splash and to bring a sport back or to bring a new sport to campus, you got the community pulling for you. And I think that's what we have really felt is really the country pulling for Little Rock, and I'm sure Presbyterian is feeling the same love to be successful and to be a model and to help those that are advocates for the sport, to be able to sit down and say, hey, call Danny Sterling at Presbyterian, hey, call Chase Conk at Little Rock. And, we're two totally different institutions, but both of us have found a way to get this done, to make it work, and really to enhance not just the athletics department, but the university. Adding a new sport is always exciting, but to be able to have so many people pulling for you and to have the sport itself, be behind this effort, we really feel like we're going to be successful because of all the help and all the support we've had over the last several months.
On the next Rocked Up, we get to work building a program with new head coach Neil Erisman. Rocked Up is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network and can be found on the web at getrockedup.com or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are found. For more wrestling-specific podcasts, check out matttalkonline.com. If you like the show and want to support it, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/matttalkonline.